We are joined now by Anthony Broome of the Wolverine, and I promise we're going to talk about Michigan on the field. Promise. But first, Anthony, we got to talk about the thing that is just eating everything else, and that is the alleged sign stealing, the Big Ten versus Michigan, however you want to do it. It feels like a very strange situation for everybody involved. Like the Big Ten basically faced with a choice of, you've got all these people on one side saying, you got to do something about this right now. And then Michigan going, what about due process? What about, you don't have an investigatory arm. The NCAA does that, and that's going to take a while. Like, what do you do if you're Tony Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner? And what do you do, Anthony, if you're Santa Ono, the Michigan president?
Well, I think if you're Santa Ono, first and foremost, I think that, yeah, you do fight this because it's a unique situation where, as far as we know, an investigation was just opened up, like whatever it was, the two weeks ago.
Right.
So
NCAA investigation. Yeah.
Correct. So for this to be, for the information that's been made available to come via leaks and anonymous sources and not necessarily as the result of an investigation, I do think that Michigan is right to be like, hey, listen, like, we get there might be a paper trail of things that have gone on, and we are going to have to eat some sort of punishment for that. Like, that's going to happen, but there needs to be as you know, the buzzword now, the due process that has to be played out. So for Michigan, I understand that. From the Big Ten perspective, the coaches' perspective, the league's perspective, given that information that is out there right now is so damning, and the paper trail is so clear, and all of these schools have these ticket receipts that go to, that are linked back to Connor Stallions, I get why they could say, what is there to investigate? It's all out there. So, I mean, there's the layers of that. There's apparently the layer that a third party investigative arm is involved here somehow. I mean, from the day that this came out, you're starting to think, wow, well, this could be a pretty fascinating 30 for 30. Now it's starting to feel like the 6-part docu-series.
I was going to say, you're needing multiple parts to this thing because it does have so many legs and tentacles and all various extremities. But so, yeah, and then like the Big Ten situation, just reading the tea leaves based on what you guys reported at the Wolverine and talking to people, it feels like the Big Ten was trying to get Michigan to do something itself. Like that they considered that the cleanest way because they don't have to put themselves out there at that point. But if you're Michigan, there's no incentive to do that. And if you don't do that, the Big Ten has to do something, or has to decide if it wants to do something. And what Tony Petitti is allowed to do by the bylaws, he can issue maximum 2-game suspension to someone. They can do more, but that would require the Joint Executive Committee to say yes, which Michigan has representation on. Not sure they'd be cool with that.
Yeah, I'm not sure they would be. I'm not sure that anyone would want. Again, I know there's been a lot of, put the shoe on their other foot. How would you feel if this was at your school? Well, put the shoe on the other foot in terms of if this was something going on with your school. Yeah. Again, with all of this information coming out via leaks and the rumors about what the origins of the investigation are, which again, I have to make clear, like whatever comes out on that side of it does not exonerate Michigan at all. Like, it's pretty clear what's out there, what the implications of that could be. But, to kind of step in and, I'm not a big fan of hitting the easy button on crying about, the witch hunt or the mob mentality. But everything right now just does feel super emotional. I think everyone involved in this needs to take a step back and take a deep breath.
Well, and I think that may be what happens ultimately. And that's the part. I don't think people understand the dynamics here. And I think that's a bigger part of it too. Like if this were Indiana, or if this were the SEC and Vanderbilt, for example, the team or the school owes a lot more to the conference than the conference owes to the school. But because it's Michigan, and it would be the same thing if it were Ohio State, or if it were Alabama, or if it were Texas and the Big 12 before the SEC now. The program does not owe the conference squat because it is a draw. It is a big reason why this multi-billion-dollar TV contract exists. So, like, if I'm Michigan, and this is the other part people don't seem to grasp in this situation because everybody wants something to happen. But if you're Santa Ono, your job is to satisfy the people of Michigan, your constituents, not the Big Ten's constituents. And I think that's the part that people don't get. Like, if I'm Santa Ono, I'm worried about what the people who employ me think about this, not what Ohio State, Purdue, and Minnesota think about this.
Yeah, and I don't think it's again. I've already said this. Like, I don't think it's a crazy ask to just ask for an investigation to play out and to let that, again, buzzword of the day, the due process of it. And I saw that, Santa Ono, a lot of people, obviously Michigan people, see the letter that comes out, and they're, yes, that's our guy. Like, Santa's fighting for us, and the rest of the nation will roll their eyes and say, well, due process. What about this and this and X incident and Y incident? It's like, I don't like that aspect of it either. So yeah, like, Michigan's going to defend itself here, and it should. I think that people inside of Ann Arbor know that are taking this seriously. It's not like they're saying that this is a witch hunt and that it's a smear campaign and things like that. Like, they just want it to be investigated, because I think even take it outside of sport, anything at a university level that has some sort of accusation like that, you take the deep breath, you take a step back, and you investigate it, and then you determine what your path forward is. But having the punishment come before the sentencing seems super weird to me.
Or before the adjudication, like the guilty or not guilty. Exactly. That's what makes this so confusing is, there's just not the mechanism to do something right now, and we've compared it to other sports, but there was a situation like this in the NFL. They didn't do anything quickly even then, and they have the power to do it. So it's going to be fascinating to watch what happens. But let's transition to the on-field part of it, because that's part of this too.
Yeah.
Their biggest game of the season is this week so far. They play Penn State. This is the first good competition that they have faced. This is the best team they faced, and it's a great measuring stick for them. How is this team handling all of the other stuff heading into that?
I get the sense that, again, I know it's cliche, but I get the sense that they've kind of rallied around it and internalized it, which is something that I think, again, regardless of what people think about how this program has turned things around over the last 2 years, I think that's a big part of it in terms of the culture that's been built is their players' ability to block out, not even block out the noise. They see everything, they read everything, and they find a way to internalize that and weaponize that. And I get the sense too that, again, I think bored isn't the right word, but Michigan hasn't been challenged this year. But in its toughest spots of the season, where you think back to the Nebraska game, first game on the road, upstart program, tough pace to play. They came out on fire right off the bat. You see the same thing the next week at Minnesota. Michigan State, a rivalry game, always tough just on that alone. Forget the fact that 24, 48 hours before that was when the drip of this whole illegal scouting operation accusation has been out there, and they came out and hammered their rival when that happened too. So it's a different type of adversity that the other teams have faced, and that's not something you can quantify and punch into a computer, and the college football playoff will necessarily take that into account. But to me, this season, I've seen this group play its best football when the questions or the noise has been the loudest. And heading into this game on Saturday night, or Saturday afternoon, I should say, that feels like where things are heading. Now, we take things one day at a time. I don't know what state the program will be in by the end of this week, or what's out there, what a response is. But based on everything we know right now, I think that Michigan is ready for that challenge. And the fact that you kind of have a game against Purdue where you play your C plus game even, and still walk out of there with a blowout, walk out of there with a lot of things to put on film and focus on this week. I think this is a really good spot for Michigan to kind of bounce back from not just everything that's been going on, but cement itself as one of the best teams in the country.
Yeah, and you look at that Purdue game, they jump all over him. They let him breathe for about a quarter, and then they jump all over him again. It seems like that they've got that gear that they can turn on when they need to. And I'm just fascinated to see it again. Like Penn State's offense is not the best. We know that, but it's an elite defense. So I want to see JJ McCarthy and company against this defense. Can they move the ball at will? Can they run the ball well? That's the one thing reading you guys, you guys have been kind of hard on the Michigan run game recently, even though they're still averaging the number 1 yards per carry in the Big Ten.
Yeah, it's nitpicky, right? Like you get through these first 9 games without a ton of resistance. I don't think they've played, an FPI team that's above like 50 or 60. So like I get their obvious caveats, in that respect, but the Michigan run game, it's almost been flipped. Like last year, the run game was a non-negotiable, and you're waiting for that pass game to come along to take that next level. This year, it's been kind of the flip side of that, and people have been surprised by that, given that Blake Corum is back, Donovan Edwards is back, and Blake Corum has the rushing touchdown numbers, but we're not seeing him get 25 carries a game for 100 plus yards. I think the biggest difference with that is this team's offensive line probably isn't winning a third straight Joe Moore Award. Seeing a little more pressure off the tackles than last year. They didn't play very well against Purdue. Again, you go back and watch some of the game film of Michigan's offensive lines these last 2 years, and some would argue this would even sort of offset the implications of how much of an advantage they would have had scouting. But they had guys that Michigan's backs were running through these running lanes that you could drive a Dodge Ram through. And
Right.
that type of push to me hasn't been there yet this year. And maybe it emerges, in the pressure cooker of the next few weeks, but through 9 weeks, it's clearly not the strength of the team right now, but I'm not out on the idea that they could have a big, stretch run here.
Well, there's also the part where JJ McCarthy can get them out of some issues if he needs to, because he is as dynamic. I mean, he's the most dynamic quarterback they've had in the Harbaugh era.
Oh yeah, without question. And I think it's JJ, it's the improvisation. I think that they've been a lot more creative with some of their run plays this year too. I mean, you see a guy like Samaj Morgan, a true freshman, scoring on a rushing attempt.
That was a beautifully designed play too, and you saw. I mean, you saw that sort of develop slowly, and you're like, wow, okay, there's nothing anybody can do about this.
Yeah, they're doing a lot better job this year. It just seems of creating misdirection, scheming some of those guys open, even just for the kind of the check down throws from McCarthy. So that's where like the offense, people are off put because the offense doesn't look as dominant on the ground. But I still think when push comes to shove, the way that Ron Moore's been calling plays, the way that JJ McCarthy's been playing, they're gonna, by land, sea, or air, they're gonna find a way to move the ball down the field. So
yeah, well, push will come to shove, probably off and on the field this week. So I will be bothering you and Chris Ballas and Clayton and everybody at the Wolverine all week. So cannot wait to see you guys in State College.
It's gonna be great to see you, Andy. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, Anthony. Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.